Reunirse con personas creativas que viven en tu misma ciudad. Saber quiénes son, qué mueve sus vidas y quizá alguna historia no contada. Bienvenidos a La Conversa, un encuentro auditivo. Soy Carlos Montivero y en cada episodio descubriremos interesantes personas desde algún rincón de la ciudad de Nueva York.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, of course.
This is very exciting.
Why don't we start off like knowing about a little bit about yourself, your background. I know that you were born here.
Yeah. So I primarily grew up in Williamsburg. I was born and raised in Williamsburg for a while. I lived all my childhood in New York. You know, growing up here it's insane. I think for the time that I grew up here.
Yeah.
I was within the 90s, and during that time we had the hip hop culture and all of these other different subcultures that also existed within New York. You don't quite see them as much as you did within the 90s, but they still did exist during that time. And I think Williamsburg wasn't what it is now. Right now it's very hip. It's very safe. It's very it's a place you kind of want to go to. Back then, it was more of a place that you wanted to restrain from, and you didn't want to walk by. Yeah, it was not a safe place. But since I was very familiar with it, it seemed very safe for me, and it seemed very home-like for me. It wasn't until I got into college that I moved out, and I was I'm leaving New York. I think I've had my piece with it. Don't get me wrong, growing up here is great, but I think sometimes you need a breather from so much people.
No, I think that's interesting that you're saying this, because one of the, like I told you before, off camera, one of the goals of these interviews of La Conversa is to get to know you as a person who grew up here, and spent a lot of time in New York City, and then eventually you left the city, you left the country, you moved to Mexico
City, yeah.
Which I believe is because of your family background,
Yeah, so my parents, my mother was from the city of Mexico, and my father was from a part called Puebla. So they're two very distinct. I mean, it's all Mexico, right, in reality, but I think even the way that they grew up was very distinct. My mom was very much into fast-paced, rushing everywhere kind of culture, especially because the city kind of does that to you. There's a lot of people, right, and you have to kind of accommodate yourself to that. Whereas my father grew up in a town kind of scenario, and it was very calm.
That's Puebla.
That's Puebla. Yeah,
okay.
My dad was very much into cows and having fresh cream made for him every morning. I would die for that, but I didn't have that experience. He did, and through his conversations, he would tell me all his experience of for example, he would play Ranas Pegan. And it's this game in Mexico, and it's very cruel, but
what's it called?
In Mexico
Ranas Pegan?
Ranas Pegan, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Or at least that's the way he called it. I don't know if that's the actual name of this game, or if it was a game. Because I think in small towns they found things that they could play with, which was great because I think my dad, he was very minimalist in the sense of how he lived. He didn't really need much to be very happy.
That's amazing.
Yeah, he was more of a minimalist on the minimalist side. I think I get that a lot from him too. It's very think of what you have and use it in your advantage rather than try to buy more and try to make more if you don't really need it. You know what I mean? And this game, it consisted of a frog he would grab it from its legs and he would spin it around and then launch it. And then he would just hear it fall, and I was that is so cruel. And he was no, Aileen, that's the games that we used to play in small towns. Where my mother, she had this, I don't know what this game is called. They do it with pebbles, kind of like canicas. I don't know what those are called, canicas, pebbles.
I think in Chile we call them bolitas.
Bolitas. Yeah. They're exactly the same. They're made out of glass, kind of. Yeah. They would. There's this game that they would shoot it towards each other. Yeah, to see who got further. Oh, when I was 16, I was looking for colleges, and I was able to apply in New York, obviously for FIT, Parsons. I also wanted to go to Paris, so I applied to one in Paris. And I'm telling you these schools because these were the ones that I got acceptance letters back from.
But wait a minute, before you applied to colleges, how did you find, or how did art or fashion, design, whatever it calls, find you?
That's way before. way before college. I think, so when I was in middle school, I was experimenting a little bit with style.
Got it.
I think this was a moment where you're kind of finding yourself, right? At that age, you're trying to see who you are and who you want to be and the type of persona you want to become. It's a very early age, I would say, to kind of figure that out. Because I didn't figure it out till like endings of college who I decided I truly wanted to be. But I think within middle school I was trying to find that path to who I am now. Initially I wanted to be an actress.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it wasn't fashion my first choice. I wanted to be an actress. I also wanted to be a pilot in the military. My mom was not having it. So, you know, her and a guidance counselor kind of redirected me to a school here in New York that's called High School of Fashion Industries, which will always have my heart because it is where I started to kind of experiment really with this idea that clothing can be a brand and it can be a career. And I will be completely honest with you, Carlos, I didn't believe fashion could be a career at all. I thought it was something that, you know, you look at a jacket and you're like, it's just a jacket, right?
Exactly.
And that's what my process was before going into this high school.
Yeah.
My professors were very they were very keen on like forming me into like what I wanted and who I wanted to be as a designer, not more as a person, but rather as a designer and as a creative. A lot of it went into like art school, and you know, a lot of them went to like telling me like, hey Aileen, like if you don't only look at art, you know, go outside of those boundaries. I know some people say that fashion should be like a job and should be something serious, but for me it's more like, yeah, it's serious, but sometimes you need to take like a chill ground.
It's like breaking or trespassing boundaries all the time.
Exactly.
It's art. That's at the end of the day is a type of art. Like
it is a type of art. Yeah.
My idea of art is like you are trying to break some rules and you know, present something new to people.
Or there's like so the way I interpret art is there's a process to it, right? Fashion. It wasn't just me investigating art. It wasn't just me getting involved with like who the designers were at that moment. I think if you're doing styling, that works perfectly well. If you're doing creative direction, that works perfectly well. But even them, they have like a different process as to how they come down to a certain product.
You get influenced by living, by life.
Yeah. For me, it's mostly
being in places. So how that, you know, relates to living in New York and Mexico City? How those two worlds, you know, kind of collided and influenced your art?
I mean, I think it was an interesting process because when I went to Mexico, a lot of my teachers were very, not upset, but they were like, Aileen, you got accepted to Parsons, why don't you just go there? Or Aileen, you got into FIT, just go there. Like, what's holding you back, right? And I also got into a school in Paris, and I was like thinking about leaving to Paris, but then again, I didn't know anyone, and I was 16. No one wants to leave their home. Not me specifically, didn't want to leave my home.
But you wanted to leave your home.
I did, but I wanted somewhere where I knew I would be safe, and that I knew I could speak the language. I didn't speak French at all. And Mexico. So when I went to see the college that I graduated from, Design Institute in Mexico City. So ever look it up, it's a boutique college, but it had so many opportunities in the sense of learning the root of fashion in Mexico, because there is a whole dynamic very different to New York within Mexico City. And not
is it
even
because of culture?
It's because of the culture, and I think it has to do with not the creative side of it, but more of the more traditional.
Right.
Well, many people think that's only Mexico, but that's a whole. That's a whole thing, you know. You have Chile that does it as well. You have Guatemala that does it, Peru, and they had no knowledge of any of it, nor how it was made or the tinas. And like, I took this course in my college where they sent me out to Tlaxcala, and it's a small town in. It's far away from Puebla, like maybe 40 minutes from Puebla. It's a small town where they do everything over loom. And everything is hand dyed, from cochinilla to like the flowers of cempasúchil, you know. And you would think cempasúchil gives you an orange color, but it doesn't. It gives you a nice yellow, light tinted.
Let's talk about a little bit about your El Cuerpo studio. Since you're talking about influences, how do you know, started like looking for finding your own space, your own path?
Right.
And I remember your statement in El Cuerpo studio is like, we are creating, clothing for humans, not for genders, right?
Yes.
Tell me about a little bit about that.
So El Cuerpo Studio really, it was me. You're not gonna like the story actually, because it's a very like, oh God, Aileen. But and I'm just gonna be very honest with you, Carlos. I think I can be very honest with you.
Yeah, that's the idea.
So El Cuerpo Studio actually started on a drunken night. I was out with friends, and we were just playing around with like names, and we were playing around with an idea for our thesis. Because initially El Cuerpo Studio started because of the thesis. There was a moment where I was just kind of like thinking, what do I want to do for a thesis? Initially, I wanted to do something with healthcare, because my sister was very much involved in my life in that moment, and I felt like a very heavy weight. Or becoming a doctor and being a general surgeon was like, maybe I can do something within that route, and in that moment I was suffering a lot of eczema. My skin was not doing too well. And I was talking to Jocko. I was like, why don't I make a product that has nanotechs within like the fibers? Just thread it in. It's waterproof, so you're able to wash it. But what these nanotechs does, that if you hit yourself, it would start the healing process. Unfortunately, Mexico did not have this technology to make it. So talking to a few professors, they were like, let's ground you a little bit. Let's think something more simple for you to do, in the sense of like what you want to do further on, right? And I was just thinking about thesis at that moment. I was just like, no, I just want to graduate college. I want to get out of here. I want to start life. So El Cuerpo Studio comes from a very like personal part of me. Initially, it was going to be called Paper Cut Studio. And that was because when I was thinking about the name, I was kind of tired and I cut my finger and I was like, with a paper, and I was like, there's a name, Paper
Perfect,
Cut.
yeah, exactly.
It's a very stupid name too, in the sense of me thinking about it. There was no thought process to it. It was just like a straightforward kind of thing. But when it came down to the brand itself, when I was maybe 8 or 9 years old, when you're a young girl, you're developing, right? You're developing body parts. You're developing as a woman, or as a teen in this sense. And I would get a lot of commentary from men. Growing up in Williamsburg, that's why I kept telling you that Williamsburg was not the safest place when you're growing up as a child. It wasn't. Now it is, and it's perfect. But back then it wasn't. And there was a lot of men, they would either bark things at you like, oh, mommy, or sexy, like all these like Spanish quotes. And,
right.
When you're 8 or 9 years old, you don't want to hear that. And I was just developing. I thought my teen years were going to be me, showing off body and being very flimsy and like sexy and beautiful. But it happened the contrary. I started wearing clothes that were very oversized. I started wearing men's clothes. I started shopping in men's section for shirts, but because it was a trauma that was going through my head of me not wanting the attention that I was getting.
Right.
So when I got into middle school, I realized that I can actually be myself for a little while, just not to an extent where I'm being like hassled by these guys that I didn't want anything to do with, right? Yeah. So a lot of them would, they would still bark things at me, but at that moment, I think I was starting to like gain what type of style I wanted to wear. And a lot of them, came down to like button-ups, what men wear, like button-ups. I wear tailored pants for a long while that were very like oversized, so they wouldn't show any part of my body, And El Cuerpo Studio kind of concentrates on that. It concentrates on being comfortable in your body, regardless of all the commentary. And if there is commentary, be even prouder of it, because there's a reason why they're looking at you. For me, I think it was also me learning that a body is just a body. It shouldn't be sexualized in the way that it is.
Right.
And that happened also when I was taking art school in high school. There's this program, I don't know if it's still active. If it is, I hope people know about it. It's High School to Art School. And it's a program in Queens that I was recommended to by one of my professors in high school. They're like, Aileen, you're gonna love this or whatever. Because I didn't have any formation as an artist. I had more of a formation as a fashion designer. And they were like, you should definitely take this course. And I was like, okay, fine, I will. And at that moment, I started seeing that the body was not a sexual thing. It was more of an artistic thing. Because the way we bend, the way we like form, even the way that we disform is beautiful, right? And I started looking at the body in a different perspective than what I used to look at it when I was a younger child. Where my body, I used to see it as something where people would just see me as sexualized.
Right, like a burden. And then it became like a inspiration kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And then it formed into more of an artistic kind of thing. Right. And I was like, so the body doesn't necessarily have to be something sexualized. It can also be something artful and beautiful. So I took that into account when I started El Cuerpo Studio. Again, El Cuerpo Studio is a brand that was formed through my childhood years into what I am now. That's why I have so much faith in it, and I have so much love for these brands, because it comes from a very deep part of me. It's my own brand. At the very beginning, I was like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Right.
I don't think any designer knows what the hell they're doing from the very beginning. But when you do, you grasp onto it, and you're like, I'm not letting this go. And once I do know what I'm doing, I'm just gonna keep going and see where it goes. I know why I put the slogan as "We are human. We are not sex. We are not gendered. We are human." Because it talks to that type of people. It talks to the people that just want to wear clothes, regardless of any acronyms, regardless of any like identifications. Again, it's not that I don't care for it. It's just I respect it in the sense that I prefer you to care for it, as long as it doesn't affect anything else around it. You know what I mean? Being under another designer is very different. You know, just sees what you need to do.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Aileen. I think I'm so excited because, like I told before, you are the first guest on this La Conversa podcast interview.
Yeah.
I'm sure that you will have, many other amazing stories, success in the future.
Well, thank you for having me. This is like the first time I'm getting interviewed for a podcast, so. Always fun, honestly. I love talking about the brands, as you can tell. I love talking about my process to it, because it's not easy. And I think if this helps a lot of other creatives to find their way, and
it would definitely influence other people. Yes.
You have no idea. Like I've seen it, and I've seen how a younger crowd, and I don't say this as if I'm old, but I've seen a very young crowd, 20s, 21s, they're a little lost in the fashion industry, and they're like, I don't know what to do. And if I can help in any sense of that way, that would be great.
Maybe they're looking outside, not inside, like you did.
Yeah, no, I think that's where we all kind of don't do. We just kind of look what other people are doing rather than what we're doing and how we want to get there, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so cool.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
of course.
Okay.
Reunirse con personas creativas que viven en tu misma ciudad. Saber quiénes son, qué mueve sus vidas y quizá alguna historia no contada. Bienvenidos